Welcome in, everybody, to this deep dive. We're going to be diving into Man and His Symbols
Man and His Symbols,
Okay.
one of the greats,
by Carl Jung.
by Carl Jung, yeah.
And this is a really interesting book because, well, first of all, can you tell everybody a little bit about how this book came to be?
So this is a book that actually Jung was very resistant to writing.
Okay.
He didn't want to popularize his ideas because he thought that it would somehow
Yeah.
cheapen them or something like that.
Right.
But he was persuaded to work with a journalist,
Yeah.
and he was able to come up with this book, which is really kind of an amazing book. It's very accessible
Yeah.
to people who aren't,
Yeah. Right.
super deep into Jung.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really interesting to me about it is how he talks about dreams and symbols.
Absolutely.
Dreams being the most common place where these symbols come out.
The dreams are like the royal road to the unconscious, as he said.
So can you tell us a little bit about how dreams are sort of different than, just conscious storytelling?
Well, dreams they work by different rules, right?
Right.
When we're awake, we're thinking logically. Generally speaking, we're trying to put things in order. And dreams, it's all jumbled up. It doesn't make logical sense. Time is distorted.
Right. It's not linear.
It's not linear. It's not.
And so how do we even begin to decode
Yeah,
this
that's a great question.
dream imagery?
Such a great question. I mean, the answer is it's not easy, right? It takes work. And one of the things that Jung really emphasized was the importance of understanding the individual dreamer
Okay.
and the specific images that they use. So, for example, let's say somebody has a dream about a key, right?
Okay.
We don't want to just jump to a conclusion about what a key means universally.
Right.
We want to know why a key for this person, why not a doorknob, why not a window, or
Yeah.
something else.
So there's no like universal dream dictionary that we can just look things up in.
Exactly. And in fact, Jung had a technique that he called circling, where he would guide a dreamer to stay with a particular image and to just keep circling around it to prevent them from going off on tangents.
Oh, interesting.
Right, because he was very concerned about
Yeah.
dreamers getting distracted from
Right.
what the real meaning of the dream might be for them.
Yeah, so instead of going off on these tangents, he wants to kind of keep their attention focused on
Exactly.
this one specific clue.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that kind of makes me think about those recurring things that we see in dreams. What did Jung call those? I'm trying to remember.
Archetypes.
Archetypes, yeah. Yeah.
These are the universal patterns of thought and behavior that express themselves in mythology and fairy tales and in our dreams.
Yeah, like, I'm trying to think of some examples, like falling.
Falling, yeah.
Or flying, or being in public with no clothes on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of those are very common archetypal motifs. And they have a deeper meaning than just, oh, that was a weird dream.
Right. And so how can these archetypes help us to sort of understand ourselves better?
Well, for example, the hero myth,
Mm-hmm.
right, which is so common in so many cultures.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a story. It's a pattern that's embedded in our psyches
Right.
that urges us to face challenges, to confront our darker selves, and ultimately to strive for growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're all kind of on a hero's journey in a way.
We are all on a hero's journey, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So what about this darker self that you mentioned? That sounds a little ominous. What did he mean by that?
Well, that's what he called the shadow.
Okay.
And the shadow is basically all of the stuff that we repress or deny about ourselves, the parts of our personality that we deem unacceptable,
Right.
undesirable, and so we try to keep them hidden.
So the hero's journey is also about confronting.
Absolutely. It's about confronting the shadow. Yeah. And Jung believed that battling the shadow is essential for psychological maturity.
So it's not about destroying these aspects of ourselves, but about kind of
It's about integrating them.
integrating them.
Yeah, bringing them into conscious awareness
Right.
so we can have a more balanced sense of self.
And how does that battling the shadow actually play out in real life? It's easy to see how that works in like a mythical story.
Sure.
But what about in our day-to-day experiences?
Well, Jung gives a really powerful example in Man and His Symbols. He talks about a man who has a dream of befriending his son's shadow.
Okay.
And what this represents is a shift in the man's attitude from constantly fighting his own shadow to actually accepting it and integrating it. And this leads him to find peace, not in individual supremacy, but in a more communal approach to life.
Okay, so it's not about conquering the shadow, but about accepting it as part of who we are.
Right.
And that makes me think about another sort of internal battle that he talks about,
Hmm.
the anima and the animus, right?
Yes,
Can you
exactly.
explain what those concepts are?
So the anima is the feminine principle in men,
Mm-hmm.
and the animus is the masculine principle in women. And
Okay.
these are basically internal images of the opposite gender that we all carry within us.
And how do those archetypes sort of play out in our lives? Are they always a positive force?
Well, not always. For example, a negative anima can manifest as an overemphasis on intellect,
Okay.
a kind of cold rationality that shuts out emotion and intuition.
Interesting.
Some classic examples would be, mythical figures like the Sphinx,
Okay.
who's all about riddles and logic, or
Yeah.
the image of a witch as a calculating, manipulative figure.
Interesting. I never thought about those figures in that light before.
Yeah.
What about more in a modern context?
Well, think about Emma Bovary from Flaubert's novel,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's trapped in this world of romantic fantasies and intellectual constructs,
Right.
and it ultimately leads to her downfall.
Right. So she's not really living in reality.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if that's the negative side, what about the positive expression of the anima?
Well, the positive anima acts as a guide to the inner world.
Okay.
It connects us with our unconscious and ultimately leads us toward the self.
Okay.
It's about embracing those intuitive, creative, and emotional aspects that we sometimes overlook.
That's beautiful. Yeah, like finding that balance
Yes.
between the masculine and the feminine energies within us.
Exactly.
And now for another fascinating symbol that he talks about, the mandala. What is the significance of this circle?
The mandala is a powerful representation of the self,
Mm-hmm.
the archetype of wholeness and integration.
Okay.
It can appear in dreams, it can appear in art, it can appear in nature,
Mm-hmm.
and it's often depicted as a circle with a center,
Right.
symbolizing this journey towards psychological balance and individuation.
So it's about achieving this sense of wholeness and becoming a more complete version of ourselves?
Yeah, it's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things.
Mm-hmm.
Jung noted that sometimes a mandala can symbolize a city. A city.
Yeah.
Yeah, representing a kind of sacred space, a microcosm of the universe.
Wow.
And he even connected it to the concept of the soul stone, which you find in many cultures where a stone represents a link to the ancestral realm.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
These seemingly simple symbols can hold such profound meaning.
absolutely.
But with all this symbolism, how do we even go about interpreting it?
That's the tricky part.
Yeah, is there a right way and a wrong way?
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to symbol interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
It really requires careful consideration
Mm-hmm.
and a deep understanding of the individual's psyche.
So we can't just open up a dream dictionary and expect to find all the answers.
Exactly. And Jung was actually very critical of rigid or formulaic interpretations.
Okay.
He emphasized paying attention to even the smallest details
Okay.
because they often hold the key to a more accurate understanding.
So it's about looking at the whole picture,
It's about looking at the whole picture and
understanding the context.
understanding the context exactly.
Yeah.
And
It almost sounds like detective work.
it is detective work. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and the other thing is to remember that Jung emphasized the importance of feeling and value in psychology,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have to engage both our hearts and our minds when we're interpreting symbols.
So it's not just a cold analysis. You have to feel it as much as you think about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of something else that he talked about, this sort of loss of meaning and the sacred in modern life.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Jung was very concerned about our modern world's overemphasis on rationality and scientific thinking.
Right.
And he felt that this had come at a cost.
Yeah, it's like we've traded wonder and mystery for cold, hard facts.
Exactly.
And I think that a lot of people struggle with that disconnect today.
Absolutely. And Jung argued that what he called civilized man had stripped away the mystery and what he called the numinosity from life.
Right.
And he believed that this leads to a disconnection from our instincts and the unconscious.
And when we neglect that part of ourselves,
Yeah,
we risk sort of falling prey to its destructive potential.
exactly.
Wow, that's a pretty serious consequence.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of what that kind of destructive potential might look like?
Well, Jung pointed to things like the development of the atomic bomb,
Wow.
the rise of mass hysteria,
Okay.
as examples of what can happen when we lose touch with our deeper selves and become solely focused on logic and reason.
Right, so it's not that logic and reason are bad,
No.
but they need to be balanced
If
with
this
other
I know.
unconscious element.
Yes.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty sobering.
Yeah.
So how then do we reconnect with the unconscious?
Yeah.
How do we kind of restore that sense of meaning and the sacred?
Well, one of the things that Jung proposed was this fascinating concept called the unus mundus,
Okay.
which is a unified reality where psyche and matter are interconnected.
Psyche and matter interconnected. That
Yeah.
sounds almost mystical.
It does.
How did he explain that?
Well, he drew parallels between psychology and modern physics.
Interesting.
I was particularly interested in physicist Wolfgang Pauli's concept of complementarity,
Okay.
which is this idea that seemingly opposite concepts like waves and particles can coexist and even be interdependent.
So he saw a connection then between our internal world,
Yes.
the psyche,
Yeah.
and the external world of matter.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating.
He believed that the archetypes can actually manifest in what he called synchronistic events.
Okay.
These meaningful coincidences that seem to defy rational explanation, suggesting a link between our inner and outer realities.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are we basically just swimming in a sea of symbols and just not recognizing them?
Perhaps to some extent, yes.
Yeah.
But, we have the capacity to become more aware of these symbols, to learn their language, and to use them as guides on our journey of self-discovery.
Yeah, this has been incredibly thought-provoking.
Good.
It's like you've opened up this whole new dimension to explore.
I'm glad to hear that.
But I'm curious, what are some practical ways that we can start paying attention to the symbols in our own lives and understanding the symbolic language?
Well, that's a great question. And maybe the best place to start is by paying more attention to our dreams.
Okay, so we're going to pick up on that in the next part.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned,
Yeah.
and we will be right back.
All right. Yeah, dreams can offer a wealth of information about our unconscious, and a good place to start is to keep a dream journal.
Yeah, I've actually tried to do that in the past, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's like the second I open my eyes, the dream just evaporates.
Oh, sure.
Any tips for people who have kind of slippery dream memories?
Well, one thing you can try is setting an intention before you go to sleep.
Okay.
Just tell yourself, I'm going to remember my dreams, and, keep a notebook and pen by your bedside so you can jot them down as soon as you wake up.
So you're sending a memo to your unconscious, basically?
Exactly.
Yeah, very to share the detail.
Right. And then once we got this collection of dreams, what do we do with it? Well, start looking for recurring motifs, symbols, emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about interpreting them right away.
Mm-hmm.
Just observe the patterns.
Okay.
What images or themes keep popping up?
Okay.
What feelings do they evoke?
So we're kind of listening for those unconscious whispers?
Exactly.
Those subtle messages?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're bubbling up.
Yeah. And then how do we move from observation to understanding?
Well, one helpful approach is what's called active imagination,
Mm.
where you actually engage with a dream image or a symbol as if it were a living being.
Oh, wow.
You imagine having a conversation with it.
Okay.
You ask it questions. You see what emerges.
Oh, that's powerful. Bringing the symbol to life, letting it speak directly to you.
Exactly.
Do you have an example of how that might work?
Sure. Let's say you keep dreaming about a locked door
Okay.
instead of just trying to analyze it intellectually.
Yeah.
Sit quietly and imagine yourself standing in front of that door.
Mm.
Feel the texture, the weight of it. Ask the door, what are you keeping hidden? Why won't you open?
Okay.
And just see what images or feelings arise in response.
Wow. It's like entering the dreamscape and interacting directly with the symbols.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I bet this approach can also be applied to the symbols that we encounter in our waking lives, too.
Absolutely.
Not just dreams.
Symbols are everywhere if we just start paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Notice the images, the themes, the patterns that arise in your everyday life.
Okay.
What catches your attention? What sparks your curiosity? What resonates deeply?
So it's like our unconscious is speaking to us through this symbolic language.
Exactly.
But we're often too distracted
Right.
to actually hear it.
We're bombarded with so much stimuli,
Mm-hmm.
that we just tune it out.
And so interpreting these symbols helps us to kind of tune into those messages and understand ourselves better.
Precisely. It can deepen your relationships,
Mm-hmm.
enhance your creativity, offer a sense of meaning and purpose that goes beyond the material world.
Yeah, this is all so fascinating. But I have to admit, it can feel a bit daunting at times.
Sure.
Any suggestions for making it maybe a little more approachable and less intimidating?
Well, remember what we were saying about feeling and value in psychology? It doesn't have to be purely intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
Approach it with a sense of playfulness and curiosity.
Okay.
Let your intuition guide you. You
Yeah.
know, don't get too hung up on trying to be an expert symbol analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Just be open to the messages and see what resonates for you personally.
Okay, so let's get practical here.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of common symbols and
Sure.
how we might interpret them?
Sure. The hero archetype, for instance. It's not just about, grand adventures. It's about everyday moments of courage, resilience, determination.
Okay.
We encounter it every time we face a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
confront a fear.
So facing that looming deadline at work
Exactly.
could be a mini hero's journey.
Exactly. And the shadow, as we discussed, represents the parts of ourselves we try to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And it often gets projected onto others.
Oh, so if I find myself constantly judging someone's behavior,
It could be.
that might be my own shadow talking.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay.
Yeah, and by recognizing those projections, we can actually start to integrate those shadow aspects and become more whole.
And what about the anima and animus?
Mm.
How do those archetypes show up in our daily lives?
Well, they often get projected onto people in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
especially romantic partners.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, a man who struggles to connect with his own emotions might be unconsciously projecting his anima onto women he perceives as, overly emotional or intuitive.
So he's seeing in others what he hasn't fully integrated within himself.
Exactly.
And what about a woman who constantly tries to control and manage everyone around her?
Well, that could be a sign of over-identifying with the animus,
Mm-hmm.
the masculine principle.
Okay.
It's about finding that balance,
Mm. Right, between the masculine and feminine energies
Exactly.
within us.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of balance, what about the mandala?
Yeah.
How does that symbol manifest in our everyday lives?
Well, mandala represents wholeness and integration,
Mm-hmm.
and it can appear as a literal circular design,
Mm-hmm.
but also in more subtle ways.
Okay.
We encounter it whenever we experience a sense of balance and harmony,
Okay.
whether it's in nature art or even in the way we organize our lives.
So that sense of peace and completion after finishing a creative project
Absolutely.
could be experiencing the mandala.
Exactly. And that brings us back to Jung's concept of the unus mundus,
Mm-hmm.
the underlying unity that connects all things.
Right.
Wait.
Synchronicities are a great example of that.
Yes, they are.
Right.
They are.
Can you give us some more examples of what that might look like in real life?
Sure. Synchronicities are those meaningful coincidences that seem to defy rational explanation.
Mm-hmm.
They often occur at crossroads in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
When we're facing a major decision or wrestling with a deep issue.
So it's like the universe is sending us a message,
Yeah.
a signpost,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
pointing us in the right direction.
Exactly like you've been struggling with a career change
Okay.
and you're feeling stuck, and then seemingly out of the blue, you run into an old friend who happens to work in the field you're considering,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they offer, insights and connections that completely shift your perspective.
Wow, that's a great example. But how do we know if it's a genuine synchronicity
Yeah.
or just a random coincidence? Because we all experience weird coincidences.
That's a good question. And even Jung acknowledged that synchronicities can be difficult to define definitively.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a few clues.
Okay.
Firstly, a synchronicity often carries a strong emotional charge.
Mm.
It feels significant, meaningful, even numinous.
So it's about paying attention to those gut feelings,
Yeah.
those intuitive whispers
It's
that tell us something's important. Okay, so what else should we look for?
Well, synchronicities often connect to a current psychological issue or challenge.
Okay.
It's as if the universe is mirroring back the themes that are occupying your unconscious.
Like a reflection of our inner world
Exactly.
in the events
That's-
happening around us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And they also often involve multiple layers of meaning.
Okay,
It's not just a simple coincidence,
right,
but a complex web of connections that unfolds over time,
right.
revealing deeper and deeper significance.
It's like a cosmic puzzle,
Exactly.
gradually revealing its message.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm still a little skeptical. How can we be sure that these aren't just figments of our imagination,
Sure.
a way of forcing meaning onto random events?
That's a healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
And Jung himself, said that synchronicities can be difficult to prove scientifically.
Okay.
But he also argued that even if we can't fully explain them rationally,
Mm-hmm.
they can have a profound impact on our lives.
So it's about trusting our experience. Mm-hmm.
Even if it doesn't fit neatly into our current
Right.
scientific understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, as we open ourselves to the possibility of synchronicities, we may find that they become more frequent and more meaningful.
That's pretty inspiring. It's like stepping into a world of wonder and mystery
Mm-hmm.
where the line between inner and outer reality blurs.
Absolutely.
But how do these synchronicities connect to this concept of the unus mundus?
Well, the unus mundus is that underlying unity that connects all things.
Mm-hmm.
It's the realm where psyche and matter are not yet differentiated,
Okay.
where everything is interconnected.
So synchronicities are kind of like glimpses into that
Exactly.
underlying unity.
They're moments where the veil between the conscious and the unconscious, between the inner and outer world, becomes thin.
Wow.
And we're allowed to experience that interconnectedness firsthand.
Jung's giving us a whole new way of seeing the world.
He is.
One that embraces both the rational and the irrational.
The scientific and the mystical.
Yeah.
But how do we apply these ideas to everyday life?
That's a great question.
It's easy to get caught up in the mundane and lose sight
Sure.
of the bigger picture.
That's a great question, and one that we can explore further. But perhaps we can start by simply becoming more aware of the symbols and synchronicities that are already present in our lives.
Okay, so we're surrounded by all these symbols and potential synchronicities, but how do we actually start integrating these Jungian concepts into our daily lives?
That's a great question.
It still feels a little abstract.
Sure. Well, one really powerful practice is cultivating a mindful awareness of the present moment.
Mindfulness, that's definitely a buzzword these days.
It is.
But how does it connect to Jungian psychology specifically?
Well, you believe that by paying close attention to our thoughts, feelings, and sensations in the here and now,
Okay.
we become more attuned to those subtle whispers from the unconscious.
So it's not just about emptying our minds or achieving some kind of Zen state.
No, not necessarily.
It's more about deepening our awareness.
It's about noticing the things that our rational mind might dismiss.
Okay, so we're training ourselves to be more receptive
Exactly.
to the unconscious. Once we start noticing those things, where do we go from there?
Well, we can start exploring their meaning, just like we would with the dream symbol.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what does this image or feeling remind me of? What associations come to mind? What deeper meaning might this hold for me personally?
It's like becoming a curious observer of our own internal world.
Yeah, like a scientist of the psyche.
Do you think that this practice can also help us to understand our relationships with others?
Absolutely. Jung believed that, relationships are a reflection of our inner dynamics.
Okay.
The people we attract into our lives often mirror aspects of our own unconscious.
Well, that's interesting. So if I keep finding myself in relationships with emotionally unavailable partners, it might be a sign that I have some work to do around intimacy myself.
It's possible. Yeah, by becoming aware of those patterns, we can break free from unhealthy cycles and create more fulfilling connections.
So it's like we're holding up a mirror to our own psyche, seeing ourselves reflected in the people.
In the people we surround ourselves with.
We surround ourselves with. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
What about synchronicities? How can we practically apply that to our daily lives?
We'll start by simply being more open to the possibility of meaningful coincidences.
Okay.
Instead of dismissing them as pure chance,
Right.
pause and consider their potential significance. What might the universe be trying to show you through this particular event?
So instead of that's just a coincidence, we shift to what if there's more to this?
Exactly.
Yeah, and as we cultivate this openness, you're saying we might start to see more.
You might be surprised by how many synchronicities start appearing.
Yeah, this is all incredibly fascinating. It really expands our understanding of how much is going on beneath the surface of things.
It does.
But I have to admit, it can feel a bit overwhelming at times.
Sure.
How do we kind of navigate all this complexity without getting lost?
Well, it's a valid concern. And Jung himself, acknowledged that the journey of self-discovery can be challenging.
Right.
But he also believed it's the most rewarding journey we can undertake.
So it's not about reaching some kind of perfect understanding or ultimate enlightenment?
No, it's about embracing the process.
Yeah, the ups and downs.
The ups and downs, the unexpected turns.
The unexpected turns.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
There are many resources available to support you on your journey. Books, workshops, therapists, even online communities.
Yeah, it's about finding those like-minded individuals
Exactly.
who share our curiosity
Yeah.
and passion for exploring these deeper layers of life.
As you delve deeper into Jungian psychology, you'll discover that it's not just a set of theories,
Mm-hmm.
but a way of life,
Mm-hmm.
a path of continuous growth, transformation, and self-discovery.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on.
I think so.
This deep dive into man and his symbols has been mind-blowing.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
It's given me a whole new perspective on myself, my relationships, even the nature of reality.
Oh, so glad.
And remember, everybody, this is just the beginning. The journey of self-discovery is an ongoing adventure.
Yes, it is.
Full of wonder and mystery and infinite possibilities. So until next time, keep diving deep, and remember there's always more to discover, both within ourselves and in the world around us. What symbol has recently resonated with you, and what might it reveal about your own unconscious?